Welcome to Getting Under the Surface, Episode 7. I'm Joey Donovan Guido, and in this episode, we'll be talking with Camille Gerrick. Camille is a neurodivergent artist living in Charlottesville, Virginia. And while her narcolepsy and ADHD present challenges to running a business and doing all the normal things grown-ups are supposed to do, she prefers to think of these conditions as her artistic superpowers. Narcolepsy causes her to experience colorful hallucinations during the fuzzy state of awareness between waking and sleep. And ADHD allows her to hyper-focus on the creative process and turn these waking dreams into reality. Growing up in the 80s and 90s influenced Camille's love of shapes, patterns, and color, especially rainbows. And her creative practice, specifically time in what she calls flow state, is essential to her well-being and a key component of managing her chronic health conditions. Camille is also the mom of 2 kiddos who keep her busy. And topics tackled today include what it's like to be a neurodivergent artist, and we'll also define that term. Being an artist while coping with chronic illness. The challenges and benefits of being a mom and a business owner, which I can attest to as being a parent and a business owner. It is not easy. Other topics include how having health issues can complicate things and how to deal with these issues physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. How the flow state is essential to Camille's well-being and a key component of managing her chronic health conditions. And we're also going to look to help new artists by sharing how Camille got started herself as an artist. And I've done enough yapping for a while, so Camille, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here. You are one of my favorite artists, and I've been following you on Instagram for a while.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's get started with the questions.
All right.
Yeah, you are a neurodivergent artist. For listeners who aren't familiar with the term, can you explain what this means?
Sure. So when people talk about being neurodivergent or neurodiverse, it just means that their brain is wired a little bit differently than everyone else's. So some conditions that might fall under the spectrum of neurodiversity are, ADHD, autism, the one where you get your letters backwards. I can't remember what that is. Dyslexia.
Thank you.
And sort of when you talk about neurodiversity, you want to acknowledge that just because your brain is different, it doesn't mean that it's any less than a neurotypical brain. And it's more about focusing on the strengths that your neurodiversity is going to bring to whatever it is you're doing. So for example, people with ADHD may be notoriously bad with time management, but we're also very passionate and driven. And when we're interested in something, we can spend hours on it and not even realize it. So thinking of your differences as strengths.
Yeah, I like that. And I think most humans I know are really good at judging themselves and comparing themselves to others and putting themselves down. And I know I experience that sometimes. So that's really good advice, is to look at it as a strength. What is the strength of that? And you just talked about some of it. And it's kind of a rewiring of the brain to start to look at oneself that way.
Yeah. And it's, also really helpful with self-acceptance too.
That's a big thing over here at Getting Under the Surface is acceptance of what is, acceptance of situations that may not be optimal.
Right.
But they are what they are.
You got to make the best of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for explaining that.
Sure.
And so you, like me, grew up as a kid in the 80s and 90s. And tell us, how has this affected your art style?
Well, so when I was a kid, I really remember having a lot of really obnoxious outfits, these crazy patterns with squiggles and triangles and loud colors, the big scrunchies, the side ponytails. And I guess I just never really grew out of that, to be honest. You see that I have my squiggle earrings on right now. And colors just make me happy, when I was a kid in elementary school, Lisa Frank was a big deal. Everybody had, the folders with the cute rainbow animals, and like you had to have that Lisa Frank Trapper Keeper for all your school stuff. I just never grew out of that phase. I mean, maybe it's childish, but it's fun and it's harmless.
Yeah, I can relate. We listen to a lot of vinyl in our house, and I find that 90% of the vinyl we buy is from the 80s, mostly because that was one of the best eras ever for music, in my opinion. But yeah, there's something about color that it kind of, it does a lot, I think, cognitively and emotionally when we see those bright colors. I'm looking at your wall. We're on a podcast, but for those of you tuning in live, Camille has beautiful art behind her, which she's created herself on her wall. And I don't know, something about that pop of color, it's kind of exciting and positive.
Yeah. So I'm actually just started reading this book. It's called The Aesthetics of Joy. And it's written by a designer named Ingrid Fatal Lee. And like the premise of the book is basically like, we've been taught through all these ancient traditions that the source of joy lies within us, and we really need to be looking within for joy. But what like a growing body of research is starting to support is that like tangible objects can also spark that feeling of joy. And she kind of like embarked on this study of finding out like, what are the things that spark joy? And color was one of her findings. So I thought that was really interesting.
Oh, that's super. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could see that. I could see, because to me, when I think about joy, I think about being more in consciousness than more, as opposed to like being in our heads, right? In thought and emotion, kind of being drowning in those thoughts and emotions. And there are certain things for me that are triggers into that place of consciousness or joy. Quite often they're tactile, analog things.
Right.
Or this visual, like I've got this clock I was telling you about earlier that's got all the spectrum of the rainbow in it. And it just kind of helps me get into that headspace.
Exactly. I just painted our entryway wall like a salmon kind of pink color. And every time I walk in the door now, I'm like, pink. Like, nice. Just gives me that feeling.
Yeah. And do you find your clients give you that kind of feedback too? The people who use your art?
I say most of the people that follow me and collect my work are also rainbow color lovers. So
yeah,
works
very
out.
Cool. Very cool. So speaking of art, tell us a little bit more about your art and how you got started.
Yeah. So I think it always sounds cheesy to say, like, I've been creative since I was a child, but there's really not a time where I can remember just not being enamored with drawing or painting or some kind of creative process. So like I can remember in the house that my sister grew up in, we had this little kids like table, and the chairs that went with the table had pockets on the back, and those pockets were just full of all our crayons and markers. And I remember just sitting at that table and coloring away. My dad is a writer and a musician, and my mom is a teacher. So she was always doing like cutesy little craft things for her classroom. And it's just something we kind of grew up with. Being encouraged to be creative. My mom was very like anti-TV as well. So that probably helped. we can't watch TV. Maybe we'll make something. And so as a kid, I was always being given those books. Like, the section in Barnes and Noble where they have all those like craft, special interest books. And oftentimes they come with all the supplies you need to do what's in the book. So I had a ton of books like that as a kid, learn calligraphy, like dollar bill origami. And specifically, there was one about macrame friendship bracelets. And I like latched on to that friendship bracelet book. I learned how to do all these different knots. And I actually started my first business when I was in elementary school, selling macrame friendship bracelets on the playground during lunch. So I would take my little like box of embroidery thread and I would like pull custom colors for people and make them custom color friendship bracelets during recess.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then sort of around this time, my grandfather, who owned his own landscaping business, I grew up in South Florida, so landscaping's a big deal, started having conversations with me about, you know, if this is what you're charging for your products, you need to think about how much it's costing you to make it and make sure that you're charging the right amount, that you're not losing money. And then, you know, what you do make from your sales, you need to decide what percentage do you want to invest back into materials and growing the business, and like what percentage do you want to save. So like from a very young age, those conversations about entrepreneurship were coming up through my grandfather.
Oh, that's amazing. I talk about that with my boys. My boys are teenagers, and we have the same kind of conversation. No one ever talked to me about that, unfortunately. But that's great advice, because I see a lot of professionals, not just artists, but just business people who have a certain amount of overhead.
Yeah.
And also, look, let's be honest, you know, not everybody can paint something in 30 minutes like Bob Ross, right? How many hours did Bob Ross take to get that proficient? I love Bob Ross, by the way, to do that. And so it's like, we're looking at the amount of time it takes to create something, plus the hard cost for materials. And then we kind of go into, when we're thinking about business, running a business, is what kind of value am I giving? Because okay, let's say it costs $20 for paint, $10 for canvas, and it takes you an hour and you want to charge $200 an hour. But is the value of that piece of art more than the time and the materials? Probably.
Right.
Probably, yes. And so what do you charge for that so it's fair to you and the person purchasing it so you can make a living?
Right, exactly. And that's like a big thing that trips a lot of people up, is pricing. And then, you know, people complaining about your pricing, and like, you have to be really confident when you set a price and you're like, this is the price. There are not discounts. Like, you're not just paying for this canvas, you're paying for the years of experience that it took me to learn this craft. And, you know, like, I'm pretty active on Instagram, and there's a lot of, you know, haters over there, like, oh, my kid could make that. Or, okay, well, have fun. If you don't want to pay my price, you can do it yourself with $200 of craft supplies. And you can see how yours turns out.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, that's unfortunate, because I think there's something else going on when people make comments like that, because, you know, well, we won't get into that today, because that's a can of worms.
That's a whole nother Pandora's box.
Yeah. But I think you're right, though. I think one thing that is worth mentioning is when we put ourselves out there as an artist, as a podcaster, you know, I do a lot of things online, blog posts, and I do a lot of speaking as well for my online marketing business. You know, it's so nice, because I do it because I love it and because it helps people, and people get value out of it.
Right.
And I think, just like you just said, we need to focus on those people who get it, and the people who say, oh, you're charging how much for that? That's okay. You don't have to buy that. You don't have to buy that.
You're never going to convince the skeptics. So you focus your time on the people who are open.
Yes. Focus your time on the people who love what you do, who are giving you positive feedback.
Exactly.
There's so much negativity in the world. I think that's really important point, that we really need to focus intentionally on those people who give us good feedback and actually hear it.
Yep.
And not just blow it off like, oh, they're just being nice.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. So we'll go back to my timeline here. So my second.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
So like we talked about, I'm going to get off track and you're going to get off track. So it happens. So my second foray, I guess, into art business was when I was in middle school. So when I was in elementary school, I was identified as like having a lot of problems paying attention. And the discussion of ADHD was like not on the table for girls in the early 90s, right? If you weren't like the hyperactive little boy, ADHD was not in the equation for you. So my school counselor and my parents kind of determined that I wasn't being challenged enough, and that's why I wasn't paying attention in school, because I was always kind of like absorbed in my own little doodles or like reading my own book on the side, like while the teacher was talking. So when I got into middle school, I was put into what they call the challenge program, which are like harder classes, basically. Mm-hmm. And as part of this challenge program, one of like the overall projects was that the kids in the challenge program had to put on a craft show for the rest of the school. So we had to like invent a business concept, like think of a product we wanted to sell, track our expenses on like what we bought to make our product, like think about how our tables were going to be set up. And like we had to throw this whole craft fair for the whole school to like come and shop our products. And so my concept for the craft fair was to make these little polymer clay animals. And I don't know how much you keep up with like jewelry trends or anything right now, but like the Fimo clay earrings are like a big deal right now. They're gorgeous. So same kind of clay. And I like, made all these little figurines, like spent a semester building up my inventory for the craft show. And then I sold obviously I sold them for the school project. But then I did that for a while too. And, by the time I got into high school, I was just a full-blown art nerd. It was heaven. My high school offered so many different art classes. I took all of them. I thought my art teachers were the coolest people I had ever met. Like I had this photography teacher who was like this cool old hippie. Like I had a painting, like there was drawing and painting class, there was pottery class, and like my pottery teacher and my painting teacher were like best friends, and they still are. They're a hoot. And just having that exposure to all different kinds of creative practices, I thought was the coolest thing. And, in my sophomore, junior year of high school, I started talking about wanting to go to art school for college. And this is where things kind of take a hairy turn in Camille's art world. I come from a very conservative Christian family, and saying that I wanted to go to art school was probably like the most horrible thing I could have ever said to my mother. Liberal art school. So yes, she was not pleased with the direction I wanted to take my career, and I started getting a lot of ridicule actually from my family about like the starving artist trope, like you'll never be able to pay your bills, like we don't think it's an appropriate investment for you to go to art school, and like we're not going to financially support you if that's what you want to do. So senior year rolled around. I still didn't have a plan for college. And so I ran away and joined the Army. This is a true story. This is a true story. I ran away and joined the Army. Because I was like, I'm not getting trapped in this little town waiting tables. I was like, I got to do something with my life. So
that's pretty extreme. Wow.
18-year-old me thought that was a great idea. I was going to do my 3 years. I was going to take the college money and run for it. But, like most things, once you're there, you kind of stay there for a while. So I was in the Army for 6 years. And at that point in my life, art really took a back seat. I was really actually kind of embarrassed. I became embarrassed to tell people that, like I liked to paint and draw, and I did a lot of it in secret. I didn't tell people like about my art. And like, of course, there was no like Instagram or smartphones or anything back then. So, it wasn't that hard to like keep your private life private. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had a lot of injuries when I was in the military. So I have like a lot of chronic pain now and like problems with my knees and hips from my time in the military. And I became really interested in physical therapy because I had done so much rehab for these injuries. And instead of getting out and going to art school, I decided that, I was going to stay in, I was going to do my degree online. And then when my second enlistment was up, I was going to go become a physical therapist. Well, that didn't work out either. I finished my degree. I was getting ready to go into physical therapy school, and I got offered a full-time job as a research analyst with the Department of Defense. And so as someone with ADHD, I actually really love research. So it was a good fit for me, and I ended up taking the job, and I still work full-time as a research analyst for the government, and I run my art business on the side.
Wow.
So it wasn't until my daughter was born that I really got back into painting. I had planned to take off about 6 months with her for maternity leave, but she was such an easy baby, like the easiest baby. She was just sleepy and happy, and I had so much free time that I wasn't anticipating. And that's when I really started painting again and created my Instagram and started connecting with people and selling my art. So there was a lot of fear that I had to get over to like kind of come out as an artist, but it did happen, and now we are where we are with everything.
Wow, what a ride! Holy cow! Most of that I did not know, and
I hope you had your seatbelt on.
I did, and there were a lot of great lessons in there, and a couple of things that really stood out for me is one, because I've heard this before. My wife got put in those accelerated programs for similar reasons. And for you, it sounds like in a way, it was like this blessing in disguise. Like you got put in this program where really you probably needed assistance with what you were struggling with. And they were like, oh yeah, she just needs more stuff to do. And lo and behold, there was this art.
Right.
And this whole kind of big project, which is amazing. And you also touched on something else as a parent that really hit me hard. Is how your parents, or your mom especially, didn't feel great about you going to art school, and how that totally changed many years of your life.
Yeah, it really did.
And it made me think about my son Max, who's about to embark into college. He's going to the University of Stout because it's got all the disciplines that he's interested in, and most specifically creation of comics and manga and storytelling.
Oh, how fun!
Yeah. And of course, as a parent, there's always a fear, right? That, okay, that's might be a hard space to work in. And it's like, but my role is to support him, right? And also make sure he's getting enough knowledge so that if it takes him a year or 10 years to get to where he wants to be for his discipline, that he can support himself, right?
Right.
And look what you're doing. You're working for the government and doing your art. For about 2 years, I had 3 jobs. One of them was SEO web design. One of them was working at Apple. One of them was working for another firm doing SEO. And, my heart broke when I heard that story. Now.
It was sad for me.
Yeah.
And so I think what I take away from that as a parent is, I want to make sure that I'm supporting my kids in pursuing their passions. Even if I don't think that's like the smartest or most financially stable choice, I feel that you have to give the kids the space to make those decisions and find out for themselves. And yes. I mean, like looking back and like talking to other artists who did go to art school, they like, well, art school didn't teach me how to market my art. And so I'm like, did I really miss out on, what did I miss out on? Like I missed out on meeting like-minded people and like being exposed to a lot of different ideas and mediums. But I mean, you can do that on your own. You don't need art school to, make you try all the things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
And,
a good point.
now with social media, it's so much easier to reach out and meet people who are like you.
Mhm.
Um,
And there's
so,
YouTube where you can learn pretty much
yeah,
anything.
the University of YouTube, as I like
Yeah,
to call it.
yeah. But I also want to just say bravo to you because you mentioned fear. Um, but from your story, we could see that one, you took charge of your life and went to the army with a specific plan. Things didn't go kind of the way they planned, which often in life they don't. But you also mentioned this fear of even saying to somebody, "Hey, I'm an artist."
Yeah.
And I remember that as a child in grammar school, especially, where it was like not cool to be artsy or different or funky. Now as adults, people, oh, you're so cool. You like this and that, and you do this art and web design. But back then it was harsh. And just bravo to you for facing that fear
Yep.
and staying true to who you are and ultimately landing thanks to one of your kiddos, right? And that whole, you went on this kind of long, winding journey, but you landed right back where you were supposed to be. I think that's kind of, if you're listening to this or watching this and feeling afraid to do something, man, was I afraid even just to do a podcast? Am I going to be laughed off the quote unquote virtual stage, right? And then I was like, you know what? Who cares?
Yep.
I want to help people. And I'm getting from you, like you said, who cares? I want to make art
Yep.
and make it for the people who are going to love what I do, people like me.
Yep. If you want something bad enough, you'll find a way to make it happen. And so kind of my coming out as an artist, as an adult, there was an opportunity to do a winter sale at a craft show at a
Mhm.
local elementary school. And I was really interested in doing it. And I was like, well, if I want to sell my art, I got to start somewhere. So I was like, we're doing the craft show. And, having that firm deadline helped me okay, I need a backwards plan. I need to get some inventory ready. These are I need some tables to bring to set up my stuff. Yeah. And, I posted on my Facebook, hey, I'm going to be a vendor at this art show. Would love for everyone to come out and see you. And the support I got back in return was, beyond anything I had imagined. I
Wow.
thought people were just going to ignore it and be like,
Yeah.
whatever. But then a lot of my friends ended up showing up and buying some things from my booth. So that
Oh,
was
that's
a really
cool.
exciting, coming out, I guess, if you want
Yeah.
to call it that.
I think it's, yeah, I like what you called it. And I think it's also important, again, just get started. There's a book, I forget the author. The name of the book is Start Ugly. It's like a $5 book on Kindle. And it's just get started, do the best you can in this moment. And then, don't expect perfection.
Right.
Because, hey, big news, perfection doesn't exist, first of all. And there's that acceptance comes in again, right? Accepting, here's where I'm at. And you know what? I'm just going to do it, which can be really terrifying.
Yep. There's so many great quotes about the fear of perfectionism too. Perfect is the enemy of done. Just do it. Your first craft show might be terrible, but the only way you're going to learn to get better is to do more craft shows.
Yeah.
So that first messy, ugly one is standing in the way of all your future progress. So you just got to bite the bullet and do it.
Yeah, for sure. So we've been talking quite a bit about your art, which is perfect, but leads me really nicely into my next question for you is, how are you able to do your art while coping with chronic illness? You've mentioned a few things, including chronic pain.
Yeah. So I have a lot of chronic pain issues from when I was in the military. And the way art helps me cope with that is, I get into that flow state where your sense of time, physical sensations from your body kind of cease to exist. And you're 100% in the moment, focused on what you're drawing or creating. And, time passes by, and you don't even realize it because you're just so present with what you're making. And I need that in my life on a very regular basis, to feel sane, like something that takes my mind off all these health issues that I'm dealing with. And there are others. I don't really want to get into them now, but just that time away, like the mental escape from really anything adulty in life, right?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I know what you're talking about. It's very meditative, that flow state, isn't it? You're kind
Yes.
of really in the moment, in what I like to call consciousness. And it's just being
Yep.
in that moment, doing that thing. And it's
very restorative to me. So, there are days when I don't feel like going in the studio, like, oh, I had a migraine today, like I'm just too tired. And there's a lot of like balance with that too, like what does my body need today? Like, let me check in with myself. Would I benefit from some time in the studio creating? Do I, need a bath and to go to bed early? Do I need to like connect with my kids and like read a story together? And, just that kind of back and forth with yourself about what do you really need in this moment, and what's going to be the best thing for your well-being.
Yeah, that's a great point. As opposed to like forcing yourself to go into the studio or sitting there and feeling like you failed.
Mm-hmm.
Because I see this a lot. My wife has a very bad fibromyalgia and diabetes, so she struggles with a crap ton of pain constantly, and it's something we've been working on helping her with for years. And it's but I can see the struggle, like this desire to do more, see more clients. She's a massage therapist, to spend more time with the kids, to be able to take walks together with me and the boys, and to be able to do yoga. And it's like, again, we're talking a lot about acceptance today, which I wasn't planning, but I think it's awesome. It's like, okay, accepting, you know what? Yes, I would love to go into the studio and my head feels like it's going to split open.
Right.
I need to lay down, and that's okay. That's the hard part. It's a yes and philosophy instead of a yes, but, right? Yeah, I don't feel well, but I should do it anyway. And then we start to get into judging and resistance, which I find resistance to be, if we can get rid of resistance in our lives, oh my God.
Did you ever read that book? It's by, his name is Stephen Pressner. I always get it wrong. Pressner. It's all about like resistance and like overcoming resistance. And I think it might be called Turning Pro.
Okay.
He's got like 2 books about it basically. And I can't remember if it's either the first one or the second one is called Turning Pro, but it was a really good like kick in the seat of the pants. If you're interested in that kind of thing, I'll have to look it up for you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, please send me a link. So yeah, that's I as you can tell, I like stuff like that. I really like diving into that, because I think this is kind of where meaning comes in life, when we start to tackle the stuff and be mindful and intentional about it, instead of just kind of going through life kind of with our eyes closed about it.
Yeah, always in survival mode.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump to a mom question now, to a parenting question. And that's what is it like for you being a mom and a business owner? Now I found out you also work full time, so that's another ball to juggle. What are some of the biggest challenges, and are there benefits?
Keeping all the balls in the air for one. There are a lot of juggling going on. That is for sure. And I heard it put the other day on a podcast or something that, it's okay to drop the balls. You just, some of your balls are made of glass. Some of your balls are made of yarn. The ones that are made of yarn, you can drop and it'll be okay, but don't drop the glass ones. So, we stay busy. It is what it is. I mean, I can't really imagine my life any other way. Like, I can't imagine like not having my kids to take care of, or like not doing my art in the evenings, or not working full time. So Yeah, I don't know. It's just a balancing act, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I like that analogy with the balls. I got to remember that one. I've been working on looking at what am I juggling that I just don't need to. Whether
Yeah,
it's
that
something,
too.
yeah. Sometimes it's like just something that when I analyze it, it's like this is not working. That's basically a waste of my time resource. Or sometimes I'm like, I've got a team of 10, so I can be like, hey, you know what? I can hand this off to so-and-so, or I can train so-and-so, and then I don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah, yeah. And then so they're in like art mentoring kind of circles too. One of the things they talk about is like, are you doing real work? Or are you just doing like the busy work that's like you think is work? So like, oh, I'm going to take this other course to learn abstract painting. That's like a busy work. That's not really contributing to your business model. Like you got to spend your time on the right things that are going to move you forward in your goals.
Yeah. Yeah. I catch myself.
Yeah. It's another thing I'm trying to think about too. I'm like, is this just a distraction? Like, I'm like, oh, like somebody sent me an open call the other day on Instagram and I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Like, let me look into it. I'm like, no, this is just a distraction because what I want to be doing is like selling my original artwork, not applying for this contest where the prize is like designing a t-shirt with some company.
Yeah. 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 That's a really good point. And sometimes we have to do the busy work, right? But it's always a question of, is this what I need? I keep lists and stuff, and it's always a matter of figuring out what's working and what's not. There's a book called Switch that I'm still in the midst of reading, but he talks about this thing called bright spots. So when you look at what you've been working on, essentially a bright spot is something that's worked. And then you can start to analyze, well, why did it work? Right? Versus the other thing, which I guess would be a dark spot or a dim spot, like what didn't work and why.
A black hole.
Yeah. A black hole.
Stay away from the black holes.
Yeah. So it's and I constantly do that. And it's very interesting when you start to look at what are the bright spots and what works. And often with me, it's about how can I build relationships with the people who I know either through the online world or in the analog world.
Yeah, you always want to reinforce success.
Yeah, exactly. And it's okay to let go of something that didn't work. Hopefully we learned from it. And that kind of is a good segue to marketing. And I did have a marketing question for you. Camille, how do you use your marketing to build relationships with people? Not so much to sell to them. And I've seen you online and you're never selling. I feel like you're always building that relationship with your viewers.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly no marketing professional, but I do consume a lot of information about marketing and how to be a good marketer. And there's a podcast that I really like by Michelle Mazer, and it's called Communication Rebel. And her whole tack is like, you can sell without doing the sleazy bro marketing tactics that kind of like bypass people's rational thought. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's sleazy marketing tactics out there that are trying to like bypass your rational thought and like make you make a purchase decision out of like fear. Basically, it's manipulation.
Yep.
And she's like, you can sell without doing that. And so that's her whole shtick that she likes to talk about. Like, let's lose the bro marketing. But really, I think marketing is just relationships. Like, I remember when I first started my Instagram, I didn't have very many followers. And it was like, I was like obsessed with like checking my followers and likes. And I was like just disappointed that, I wasn't getting more visibility. And someone challenged me. She's like, it's social media. You're supposed to be social on it. Like you're there to like interact with other people, not just like post something and walk away and like see how many likes it gets. So, talk about vanity metrics don't matter. It's about the relationships that you're building with the people that do follow you. And so I guess lately, like, so when I flipped my mindset and started viewing Instagram as a tool for building relationships, my account like just grew and a lot more. And like, I'm not a huge account by any means, but that's fine. I subscribe to the 1000 True Fans philosophy of selling our online business. So yeah, it's just about like building relationships, being kind, connecting with people. And, you know, maybe that doesn't always lead to a sale, but like, what did you really lose in the interaction? Like maybe you made a friend. Right?
Yeah. You sound like me. This is how I explain it to people. It's, you know, it's if we develop a relationship, sometimes we find a friend or a mentor or a mentee. Sometimes we find a client, and every once in a while we find somebody that we just don't ever want to talk to again. So, but it's when there's no expectation for a sale, we can focus on that relationship, and that's, you know, I think the word selling got kind of twisted into what you call, did you call it the bro
marketing?
Bro marketing, like, you know, buy this or die. It's like, no, hold on, wait a minute. If I connect with you and I understand your pain, even if it's just, look, I want a beautiful piece of art on my wall because I'm feeling kind of down in the middle of a Wisconsin winter. I want something bright. Oh, look at this. Look at Camille. Holy cow. You just solved my problem without trying to sell me anything.
Right.
And all I had to do was find you, and you started building that relationship through your videos and your posts. And I think it's kind of like something I was hoping the pandemic would have this positive outcome where people would stop trying to use this manipulation bro marketing, as you call it, and start to connect more. And I've seen it happen a little bit. For the most part, people have gone back to the normal way. And, you know, I liken it to, you know, either it's really like casting a net and trying to catch as many people as you can, kind of objectifying people as things that go through a funnel.
Yeah.
As opposed to developing that relationship where, you know what, it's non-transactional. Yes, somebody buys a piece of your art, but it's non-transactional. You might still stay in touch with them on social. All of a sudden, annually, semi-annually, they are looking to acquire more of the art they love from you. And it becomes this kind of this blessing of a relationship that you would never get through a transaction of just trading money for a product.
Right. And like, you just want to be at the top of people's mind, like when they do decide that they're ready to make a purchase decision.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah. And that whole thing about metrics is sometimes deceiving, because a lot of times I do stuff on social, and then like 3 years later, someone's like, I've been following what you do for 3 years and I'm finally ready to talk to you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, wow, nice. It's not a total waste of time. You know?
Yeah. You never know who's out there. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's really cool. That's a great way of putting it, when you switch to developing relationships, how your social media actually grew.
Yep.
And speaking of social media, I'm done with our questions, except for one more, which is where can people find you?
Sure.
Online?
So sort of my online alias is Camille Loves Color. So on Instagram, I'm at cammy.loves.color on Instagram. And then also my website is cammylovescolor.com. I am on Facebook and TikTok as well, but I'm not very active on either of those platforms. So Instagram is where it's at.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of these links will be in the show notes. So if anybody is interested in checking out some of Camille's online presence, you can find that there. And wow, this was great. This wraps up another episode of Getting Under the Surface. And Camille, I want to thank you for being a guest today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had a blast talking with you. And if you listeners out there liked what you heard today, feel free to subscribe to Getting Under the Surface. It's available for listening on any of the major podcasting platforms. And until next time, be well.
Bye.